Okay, all right. Hello. This is Verse, and I'm here with Meta Nomad, philosopher, online, anonymous, Twitter account. You know, does not need any introduction. Um, hey, to say hi to the audience, I guess.
Yeah, I was to say hi. Thanks for having me.
I haven't got the intro thing down yet. We'll figure that one out.
Oh, don't worry about intros. They're useless.
Exactly.
The worst thing you can do is a big long intro.
Yeah, it's very true. I'll just get right to it. So we're kind of all quarantined now. And even though I had things prepared before things kind of hit the fan, now it's hard to think about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Are you faring well in the quarantine now?
I don't tend to leave the house much. I mean, the British quarantine seems to be that it's going to be stay inside or go to work or go get shopping or medical, and that seems to be the four primary things that you're sort of allowed to do unspokenly. And that's pretty much what I do anyway, unless I get taken somewhere. I wouldn't actively. So for me, the quarantine isn't a big thing. Same with the social distancing is. I didn't realize that was a thing until clearly extroverted people pointed it out that it's an active thing to keep your distance from people. But where I am, which is East Anglia in the UK, I think there's only 3 cases so far. So it's not, it is affecting here, and things don't usually affect here. So people are a bit surprised by that. But ultimately, I don't. I'm faring well. I'm faring fine. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
Yourself? I'm in an epicenter, so I'm probably gonna be fucked soon. I'm in New York City. New York City.
Yeah. Well, you were fucked anyway living in New York City.
Very true. I was going to go to see my family, but I figured I'd probably already been exposed, and I was like, I might as well just stay here and keep them safe. I'll take the bullet then.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I guess, fitting because you write a lot about like accelerationism and like eschatological topics. So I feel like I couldn't have a better guest on.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't think there's too much substantial X risk. It's a 3% mortality rate. But what this is showing is that if you start to think in terms of what if it was even 10%, 1 in 10, and that seems like nothing. But what we're seeing some places it's 2%, some is 3, let's just say 3 for sake of argument. What we're seeing from a 3% thing, it's not the mortality that's affecting us, it's not the deaths, it's the overload of a system. And it's what they're just showing us is exactly how just ridiculously close we are at all times to what many people would consider collapse. And I mean, this isn't going to collapse everything. I think what I personally foresee from this is quite a lot of good things, if I'm being hopeful, but quite a lot of bad things. So the bad things it's going to be a big recession. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, interest rates are already hitting 0%, and when things start to hit 0, the sort of transcendental and capitalist meaning of the entire framework is gone. It's not there. You're also seeing what Kaczynski would call surrogate activities come to the fore, and they're the first things to fall.
So wait, what would you consider? What did Kaczynski consider surrogate activities?
Very roughly, anything which wasn't primary to our survival. And in a society within modernity, our survival is, water, food, shelter, oxygen. I mean, that's and to a lesser extent, companionship and love. These things are all so. Shelter is sort of just, I don't know, given. I don't want to exclude homeless people there, but there is, as far as I know. I mean, I'm fairly ignorant in this, but there seems to be a means to get some form of shelter, and shelter's not as big a deal, and otherwise you're not going to die of exposure most of the year. And then food and water is sort of literally on tap. So Kaczynski's point there is that our base survival instincts are gone because we don't need to actually attend to them. So we attend to surrogate activities, which really is kind of anything. I mean, outside of this, for our meaning, but of course, because it's not, well, in Kaczynski's opinion, I don't fully agree, because it's not directly related to our survival, it doesn't never really quenches our meaning. Now, what we're showing actually is that, you know, what I listed there of the four things which, the four places that, you know, take my government, for instance, are happy for you to go is work, the shop, home, and medical. So at home, you've got that's your shelter. The shop is your food. Work is the thing which allows you to get water and electricity, and medical is, you know, the thing that continues your health. So you know, kind of coincidentally, but not coincidentally, those four places that we're allowed are just direct to our survival. So, you know, there's no unnecessariness, and what we're starting to realize, what is necessary, of course, is survival. So in a certain way, that's a good thing. I mean, there is other bad things, but it's largely going to be the recession and a sort of drought of innovation for a while. But the good things are sovereignty. A lot of people are going to become more individual again, because they're going to realize, well, they're already realizing, well, actually the government can't protect us, you know, from this. I think there's going to be a lot of leniency on after this on sort of housing laws.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, as far as I can see, this is sort of a long overdue natural cull. And there's going to be, you know, I mean, you can jokingly say, I mean, I you know, the whole boomer thing, I'm neither with it or I'm neither for it against it. It's just you know, it's nothing to me. But the whole meme of calling coronavirus the boomer remover, there is a truth in that, because it's sort of a long overdue death for generations which are really clinging on, when without machinic and technological support systems, they would have been long gone. Yeah. So you see a lot of, you know, there's a fair amount of proof out there for the fact that the reason a lot of younger people can't climb career ladders is because the older generations refuse to retire or even leave. There, you know, and with that, you know, there's a hoarding of resources, there's a hoarding of property, and I'm not saying they haven't earned it, but there is a limitation to what can be owned. So I think within kind of after the 10-year period after coronavirus, I think there'll be the big surge, but it's going to take time. And yeah, I think there's sort of a libertarian promotion coming from this. And also, I'm hoping this will teach people that, you know, modernity sort of teaches you that you're immune, that you're safe. You have this real false sense of security. And I'm hoping this will teach people that, you know, they need to sort of become more like Robert Heinlein or Renaissance. You know, they need to understand where things come from. They need to understand how to make things, etc.
It's true. I can definitely say that, like, even, I mean, I've already kind of recognized the fragility of modernity. I mean, I think anyone who's like in the reactionary space kind of has. But I even see like a normie or whatever, talking more about like sovereignty and like, you know, issues with supply chain and like things they need, and like prepperism and whatever kind of became a little more.
Well, that's the other thing that's gonna surge with after this, is not so much nationalism in the sort of ideological, like waving the Union Jack around sense, but economic nationalism, self-sufficiency of nations, and localism, and potentially communes again for people to want to feel secure. But I think that you're going to start to see real distinctions between territories and connections. And what globalism has done is try to merge all these into one homogenous sort of soup. And we'll start to see a real splitting, especially where places have good quality food, which they won't want to share very soon. Yeah, and even if this kind of blows over and there isn't too much of a sort of dent, it's enough of a psychic or psychological shock to the liberal system and the progressivist system to sort of jar quite a few people out of their default beliefs.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, it's a major hit to globalism for sure. And like, if you remember at the very beginning of the year, it was a lot of like, it was racist to talk about like limiting travel or to limit trade or whatever, and it was considered like, you know, like a peak like sin to like the liberal global order. But now it's becoming very clear that like being a little more national with respect to economy and like being a little working more locally, this a lot of the cross contamination between countries could have been avoided. So yeah, so I do think that it will definitely at the very least change the way people are viewing like globalism, much like, you know, the Spanish flu did in early industrial revolution, the earlier parts of the industrial revolution. So that's nice. I can't stop watching Spanish flu document, or I guess like all viral epidemic documentaries at this point. So I feel like I'm looking a lot towards the Spanish flu, and I'm kind of concerned that we might get a second wave of in the winter, much like that happened there.
Well, as I understand it, from what a lot of people in the know are saying, I can't really put any references here, but I've read a fair amount on this, is that this is going to become sort of like the flu, you know, but lesser in terms of how many people it's affecting. But, you know, every year, you know, be like, oh, they're off work, they've got corona. It's just unfortunate because obviously flu isn't as bad because, one, we know how to deal with flu. If people have it really bad, we have antibiotics, we have systems in place. There is immunity, there is vaccines, there is et cetera, et cetera. Everything's in place. We know how to deal with the flu. You know, the reason this is so bad right now is this completely novel thing. So all these people, one of the frustrations is all these people saying cancer kills X amount every year, suicide kills X amount, alcohol, drug overdose, et cetera, et cetera. You know, all these, you know, they're saying that there's way more, you know, 200,000 by cancer or whatever. I'm not sure the statistics. The point of these people are trying to make is why are we worrying about this when it's only killed 3,000? Well, the reason we're worrying about this is because, well, one, a lot of the things that these people are citing aren't viral. You know, alcoholism isn't viral unless you really, I mean, you could probably make a case for that.
Yeah, like
some sort of postmodernist.
Yeah, like a newest fear virus, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So good, but you see what I mean? Then that's not viral. Cancer isn't, etc., etc. So this is literally a virus, and it has to be contained. But it's a novel virus with no previous research. And the other things are already implicitly able to affect the entire world. So when you put, let's say there is, I think roughly 150,000 cases of coronavirus at the moment. So when I think it's 3,000 deaths, I'm not sure, I can't remember. But if you would apply that to 7 billion, whereas, you know, 200,000 or whatever it is for cancer to 7 billion, it's a different ballpark. So all these people are saying, well, why are we ignoring the other things? We're not ignoring the other things. We're paying attention to this because it's novel, it's new. And if you don't sort of tend to control something new, which is wrecking you very quickly, and say, well, it'll be fine, then, you know, you need to find out what it is capable of very quickly. Yeah,
it's true. So what do you what are your thoughts on it being potentially being like a bioweapon?
Unfortunately, the sphere that I'm within, I mean, it's hard to differentiate between sort of legitimate stuff. But I mean, you know, major news outlets are reporting on this. You know, there's one of my favorite TV series ever is a UK Channel 4 series called Utopia, which they release a flu, but the weaponized aspect is actually in the vaccine, which is it causes
autism.
No. I've completely forgot the word. Basically means that people can't have kids. It's a malfusion.
Oh, okay. Sterility.
Yeah. It causes people to be sterile. That's the one. So only 2% of the population would be able to have kids, so they deal with the population crisis that way. So sort of my conspiratorial brain fires on, because obviously if this is spread everywhere and it's so awful that you want to get rid of it, obviously vaccines can become very appealing, and that's the thing that they can sort of tamper with, because you're actually begging, you know, if a big flu comes out, then of course countries are going to try and avoid it. If a vaccine comes out, people are going to actively
engage in
march towards it. But I don't want to engage in the bioweapon discourse too much, because as far as I can see, it is, I don't know, it just,
I feel like it's an accident. I think I know that they were doing testing. They definitely were
that way.
They were definitely testing. I know they were doing. I mean, there's a bunch of articles that they were working on increasing like viral vectors or whatever, like vectors of like infectiousness for SARS or whatever in Wuhan. And I do think it was an accident that it got out, but I do think they were tampering with the virus itself. I think it's kind of like it's human error is usually more likely. Typically, you know, you can usually rely on incompetence. But I do think that I mean, it is confirmed that they were, you know, messing with the virus like in Wuhan. Sure,
but I mean, at this point, there's enough people testing the virus that I just think is that an important fact at this point, unless we start to realize other things.
I mean, I will say for sure that you're what's the word? You're warning. I mean, the potential for a vaccine to be weaponized is definitely something to consider. Like even with like the AIDS epidemic, even if it wasn't actively done, a lot of the people who took the first several waves of the AIDS whatever drugs, the cocktail drugs, were killed from the medicine itself. So I personally would stay away from any kind of cure or vaccine that's rushed out immediately after a pandemic. You don't know what the effects are long term. Yeah,
and all these people sort of hastily retweeting things about vaccines. I don't know the complex ins and outs of it, but I do understand that it's almost a year-long process, and that's you know, that's with one that's been really rushed through. And from what I understand as well, the recent British flu vaccine was terrible.
They generally are, especially
some people basically do get the flu, which people always go, oh no, you better feel it a bit, but some people genuinely do get something which is close enough that you could really do some damage, and certainly very fragile people couldn't withstand these things. But of course, this is the overarching thing which coronavirus shows, which is that we're not safe. We're not outside of this yet. You know? These things can happen, and you'll hear people say things along the lines of like, "Oh, this is crazy, this is mad," and I think anyone who's read any book on resource limitation or collapse, and even the sensible ones, I'm not talking mad stuff here, will understand that this isn't crazy, this isn't mad. These things can happen. You just happen to live in a time where there's so much and so many systems in place to secure every sort of kind of idyllic thing. And if you go back to sort of any other age where we didn't have this sort of behemoth of technology over us, this wouldn't be surprising. It wouldn't even be named. You'd say, well, people are dying of, whatever, let's just call it X. And people die of things, Modernity is sort of the anti-death. It doesn't like to promote or even show that death is still a possibility. Death is tucked away in hospitals, it's tucked away in mortuaries, we bury the dead, etc., etc. It's taken care of, and so is pain. These aren't things which these are things which are trying to cease to exist. And when this comes along, the initial reaction is always this is mad, and it's mad for those reasons that it's completely the antithesis of everything that modernity is unconsciously teaching you.
Yeah, it's true. People are starting to see, I guess, like the cracks in the seam. We have been sheltered for quite a while from any real natural calamities outside of like actual natural disasters in like Katrina or something. It is very easy for most people to forget that we are still subject to, biology and, the world we're living in. We're not completely out, but it is very much a religion or I guess like a religion. It is, yeah, I guess it's a religion of like modernity that like we're safe from these things, and it is interesting seeing like actual normal people respond and react to this and understanding that like, yeah, we're not completely safe. You don't seem, I mean, this corner of the internet doesn't seem so crazy during a pandemic.
No, and one of the things that someone tweeted quite a while ago now was it's kind of a joke saying, I wouldn't always go back to the same right-wing nut jobs every time, but historically they have turned out to be true. And
Yeah.
and you can laugh at Alex Jones, but I mean, you look back and consistently he's been right. So there, and generally people making predictions years ago, which I would have thought insane. So
you talking about Kaczynski? Wait, who did you say?
No, Alex Jones. Alex Jones.
Oh, Jones. Oh, yeah, Jones for sure. Jones needs to be vindicated from like every he's so many things he said has been correct.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he's Bill Hicks, he needs to. He has been consistently right. I mean, I don't know. The last time I saw him was on Joe Rogan, but everything he said on that podcast was correct and has been shown to be right. But yeah, no, it's interesting how panic people are, even though we know that those people who panic are in some sense of it, are hypersensitive to like anxiety. It is it's weird that we don't give them more credence when things are going well.
Well, no. Yeah, I understand that, but of course the media would never sort of want to say that Alex Jones got something right.
True.
But I don't want to go too far down the Alex Jones route. I'm not like a supporter or anything. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not an image that I'd want to promote.
That's fair. I mean, I work under the principle that everyone has some sense of there's some glimmer of truth to everyone's kind of perspective. So even though he's definitely a little bit or a lot of it fringe, clearly there's actual information that he's like finding, right? So I give him some level of like I listen to him a little more than I guess the average person would, but I don't think everyone's completely crazy personally, but that's just me. But speaking of, so let's go into your writing, because you did that series recently about like exiting modernity, and it's hard to. Typically, I try to read everything everyone does, but you're very, very prolific, and even though
I used to be. I mean, I haven't written in quite a while. It's something I want to get back to, but the podcasting is very difficult to explain how much time it takes up and why. I can't really seem to find why it does, but there's so much time goes into it.
It is weird
in the in between times, waiting for emails, etc. So yeah, and I mean, it's not a massive excuse. It's a lot of what I've wanted to say has been written, and I'm sort of doing that thing where you take a good long break and come back sort of refreshed, because I was fairly close to burning out, and I'm very close to sort of pinpointing the vision it is that I think is helpful and cathartic for people, and that has helped me. And I don't really want to put that down until you were asking about exiting modernity, or did you want to talk about?
Oh no, I mean, I was listening to what you were saying. I mean, I think there's ebbs and flows to creativity. I mean, obviously you have to show up, but I agree that podcasting, for some reason, despite it only being a conversation, does take up a lot of time in between. And even if you don't do a lot of editing, so I understand that completely. But yeah, exiting modernity. So from what I got from it, it was effectively practicing and becoming better at being more mindful of your that you're in like a reward system, and that you ought to figure out what reward treadmills you're on, and try to become more mindful of what you actually want versus what modernity tells you what you want. Is that more or less the gist?
Yeah, that's a very big part of it. But it's very, very difficult to explain to people who are in these systems, because these systems are giving them dopamine releases, and they are they are giving them what they supposedly want. They're giving them desires. So it's difficult to explain to someone why what they desire isn't actually what they desire, because you sound like you're simply trying to, let's say there's two teams, red and blue. If someone desires red, then I just sound like someone who's trying to promote blue. Whereas the actual point of that is saying, no. The two choices and the actual idea of that choice is given to you by a certain party. So the red and the blue, they exist in exactly the same desire. My point is not the whole third root thing. My point is to just remove yourself entirely from that as much as you can. Of course, you're going to go back into choices, but once you understand that just because you're X doesn't mean you can't also be Y, etc., etc. It's not this binary thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I got that, but also the part that like really got stood out to me was not just like your, I don't know, day-to-day desires, but also like coming to terms with like the introspection of like coming to terms with what you actually want, which is more or less what you just said, but like the actual mindful practice of it, of like actually thinking about what is it that you're desiring versus what goals are you going after that you otherwise wouldn't. And
yes.
Yeah, and the practice of it is what's interesting.
Yeah, but the problem is when you talk about going. Sorry, I've just realised my plant needs some water. Don't do it right now. I will forget.
There's a book, I don't know, it's like the most normie book I have. I think it's called Getting Stuff Done, about like
those books are helpful, but the problem is that these wants are so abstract that people talk about. Let's just take one, the clear one. People who want a really good career. They want to go up the career path. Let's take just sort of your office work. You start as sort of an office jockey, just doing admin, and then you go up and become sort of a team leader, and then a partner, and then you want to go up to the big boys. And what's behind that is what's important for me. Now, what's behind that, as far as I can see, is status. That's the clearest one. To a certain extent, power comes from status and being able to hold status and mimic status. Status, however you wish to.
We're global. We're global pronunciations here.
Yeah. Some people would say SMV. Your sort of your market value as a person. Money, I think, but money is also tied to status. Perhaps a little bit of fame, but I don't think so for many people. So really, as far as I'm concerned, is you have to ask yourself, well, why do I feel the need to prove myself to other people? And that's one of the key questions is what am I trying to prove, and what am I trying to show, and what am I trying to say about myself to other people? And the most important thing is, well, why do I actually want to do that? And if you really track this back, you'll realize that it was probably something you were told that you should do by an education system. The why is usually just because, or people have always done it, etc., etc. And the why isn't usually some conscious decision that you've come to on your own. It's just something that was thrown sort of into your life. So, you question the root of everything you can.
But what do you say to like me saying that much of that might, even though it's been passed down like in culture, what if a lot of this desire to prove yourself as a status, or prove your status to the group, is like based in our actual human animal, right? Like,
no, for sure it is. There's always going to be status hierarchies, and there's always going to be competition, and there's always going to be those who want to win and succeed. But I think they're few and far between, and I don't think I think a form of success is admitting to the desire to exit from certain forms of success. That's not for me. And not being bitter about that, not coming across as someone who's like, oh, I didn't want to do that anyway. It's like, no. Just because I didn't do route X doesn't mean I can't do route X. I just couldn't give a crap about that entire thing. That's a non-object or non-thing for me. It's not something. But of course, once these things are within the culture, they're sort of unavoidable, and you have to sort of comment on them, work with them. It's sort of like saying to people, well, I'm not actually that interested in working, or I don't really want to live in a house, or what do you do on your weekends? I just sort of sit and look out into a lake for both days, etc., etc. These things which are just outside of the normalcy. These are important. These are important to me, and cracking open that normalcy window, I think, is extremely important for freedom. Because it's along with the Overton. The tighter the Overton window gets, the tighter the idea of what's normal gets, and that's dangerous. So
yeah.
I think,
it is. I like your example of like staring at the lake. It is because it's a value of like, that requires no money effectively. There's no like hierarchy or status competition or anything of that nature. It's very much like, I value like my serenity and like being able to sit with my thoughts and the peace and calm of this particular scenery or whatever. And it is hard, especially when you have like people in your life, to validate interests or values, I guess in this case, that are completely outside or are fairly normal behaviors, but they're not, there's no intrinsic reward or systemic reward rather, and it's entirely an intrinsic reward. I guess like the artist is the only real like accepted avenue for that, like follows that, where it's like, or maybe I guess the teacher, where it's like the non-capital rewards are considered to be acceptable, right? Like teachers always say in the US at the very least, I don't know what they are like in the UK, that, I do it. It's about more than the money. It's about like impacting the lives of these children or whatever. And there are a few routes that are acceptable even in the US that are not capital based, but they're very limited. As you said, like the Overton window is like shrinking.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no question there. I just was like thinking about that. Cool. So there's that. And then you also have come up with very interesting varieties of like accelerationism. I mean, or at the very least you wrote the primers on them of like Ziak and recently-ish the APAC. I don't know.
APAC?
Yeah, didn't you write about that? I don't know, appropriate acceleration or was it?
No. I haven't even heard of this one.
Wait, you said, I was definitely on your website. It was like a Greta Thunberg and some kind of...
Oh, blimey. Let me...
yeah.
Let me just see, because... Yeah. Let me check, because it's...
Yeah, I mean, like they get too numerous to like keep track of at some point. The varieties.
There's no. I don't think there's anything here about acceleration.
Wait, one second.
No,
I think I have it up, but my computer's running slow because I have like 1,000 things. Appropriate acceleration. No, from green acceleration to appropriate.
No, I was featured in that.
Oh, you were featured in that. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. That wasn't me though.
But like the point more so was about the various varieties of ACK, like the UAC, ZAC, GAC, whatever. There's endless varieties of like what the acceleration of techno capital will be like. What is your like? Which one do you adhere to the most, would you say?
Oh, Ziak, which I can't.
Ziak for sure?
Yeah, that's my baby. But I mean, Ziak's just an offshoot. There's ACK. There's accelerationism, and then the rest. It's very tough to, even with Z or ZAC. It's very tough to justify the need for the letter.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ziyech is simply accelerationism understood within a framework where numerics and what's called zero and the existence of cyber negative possibilities, which is basically that there is limitations and these aren't spoken about or written about primarily in other accelerationist stuff. So it's the pessimist sort of hellish variant, but I think that's in the acceleration if you look at it, but it's quite tough to find. I have a big, like 10,000 word interview coming out on zero accelerationism, like tonight, I think.
Oh, really?
Tomorrow, yeah. So, yeah, but that's the one that's the one that I'm slowly formulating.
So, like, just for the listeners outside of just like, can you just give like I mean, you kind of just did, but like a brief summary of what your understanding of Ziyech would be.
Oh, Ziyech. Okay, so if we understand accelerationism as positive-oriented cybernetics, that is, it's capital as the system which just keeps going. It subsumes everything into it, and anything it doesn't subsume, it is deemed worthless and will wither away. This is how the system built itself. Now, within this, the Z of Ziyech stands for zero, as in the number zero. Now, zero itself is a strange concept, very, very strange. One sec. So zero is sort of this just the can't call it even a point, because zero isn't a point. It's the nothingness where a reversion or an inversion of energy happens, and zero is within acceleration. Accelerationism still aesthetically promotes this idea of one after another, unfortunately, and zero is the thing that breaks that, and it needs to be understood. And zero is the point of learning for capitalism, but unfortunately, zero also holds the natural, implicit, a priori means for entropic forces and natural sort of chaos. These things which aren't tailored to or taken into account often by capital because they are so peculiar and rare, and it's sort of a cosmic type of accelerationism.
So just as like my little side, as someone who studied math, zero didn't naturally arise in most civilizations. It was
zero, I believe. Well, Nick Land takes zero to be basically the birth of capitalism, which basically means you could say that zero, the immanentization of zero within culture is the singularity. Because when you think of zero, even if you think of it as in practical terms on what we call the inside, it is the metric. Either side of it is proof of workings. It's proof of success or failure. It's proof of profit or loss. Without zero, there is no comparison. There's no compensation. There's no means to either subsume or cast out certain things. Zero comes around basically at the birth of modernity. I think it's widespread in culture in around the 17th century, I believe. That's the first time the actual signifier of zero comes in. And you can't think about zero as a person. It's not a possibility. It's the moment of possibility. It's not a possibility in itself, but it's the moment in which, sort of bereft of time, that things fly into and fly from. 0% interest. I mean, what does that even mean? That's hell. 0% growth, etc. That's the point of change. It's the stepping into a new river. Zero is pure sort of pure Heraclitean philosophy. It's yeah.
Yeah. All right. Very cool. So the just trying to anyway. So you are saying that like you don't think that I'm trying to like sorry, I'm fried right now. So the acceleration, generally speaking, with there's always some kind of movement. In most of the philosophies, there's some kind of like movement towards or away from. There's like a linear, sequential time, and you're saying in Ziak that part is negated, and it's
well, there's no sequential anything in accelerationism generally. Zedek just understands that certain things can happen, which I don't think are spoken about enough within the accelerationist writings, which I think is enough to warrant the interjection of Zero and Zedek and say, look, here's this other angle.
Yeah, definitely. So with I'm just going to slightly change topics. Since I always have to make sure I add this in, since most of my audience comes from the crypto community, this here Corona situation is kind of demonstrates the I guess it's kind of the inviolability of or like the it like negates the thesis for Bitcoin as being like a store of value and a way for us to like work in this global society. Because this should be a catalyst for it, and yet evidently it's kind of not meeting expectations. What do you like think of crypto much at all? Do you
not at the moment. I this could have been the point where crypto really showed its practical worth. This is the perfect opportunity for Bitcoin. Unfortunately, I don't think enough people were brave enough to believe that the actual whole entire system which upholds Bitcoin would still be around. So they hedged their bets and sort of fell upon comforts. Of course, in any actual collapse situation, holding your money in Bitcoin or stocks or anything along those lines, even gold, is silly, because you're assuming that there's going to be a rebirth of that exact same economic system. So, yeah.
And there likely will not be. So, and I don't think this is a collapse event, but at the very least, things will be rethought. What do you see like collapse looking like in the West?
Slow, very, very slow, and sort of defeated, and no one admitting. That's going to be the problem. Admittance is when you can really begin to rebuild. It's going to be a very, very long, I'm talking 40, 50 to 100 years process. I mean, we're already in it. John Michael Greer calls it the long descent. There's hundreds of things you could list which sort of prove his theory that we're already in it. Housing crisis, student debt, basically everything being a bubble. My mind has gone blank. So you could sort of ridicule me for not being able to list a load of things, but ultimately I would agree with what Greer says, which is when people say, "When's collapse coming?" I would say, "Look outside your window." It's there just very subtly, in terms of what we did have at certain points.
I agree with that. So actually, you just mentioned John Michael Greer, which is interesting because I forget that you do a lot of. I don't know if it's a. I know he does a lot of occultist writing, and the occult is like very big on this side of Twitter, which I think is also interesting since so is like Catholicism, and though they obviously intertwine. What is your how do you feel? I've been reading actually because of you a lot of.
Sorry, you just lagged out there. What is my?
What? Oh, because of you, I was just reading more of John Michael Greer in particular because I saw you tweeting about him. And I was just wondering, like, what's your view on like some of his occult writings there might be, or like,
in what sense do I believe it's true?
Oh, I mean, even if you believe it's true,
I do believe it's
true. What value do you find in occultist writing in modernity, etc.?
if you're talking about the value that I find in occult writing in relation to modernity, occultist writing will reveal that modernity isn't the only system, which is basically what its modus operandi is, which is it wants to suffocate any other system or belief system or way of being and make you understand from the youngest age possible that this is the only way things can be. And occult writing and occultism in general, but as well as spiritual traditions, I might add, allows you to understand that there is more. And this is the problem of striving towards things, because modernity gives you very clear things to strive towards. All material, bigger, faster car, bigger house, better job, more money, and you see this in one of the sort of ironies that young budding occultists realize is that people always make the joke of like, how come all these amazing occultists aren't rich and famous? And they usually say something along the lines of, once you realize what this can do, you'll no longer really want money, because you'll realize there's so much, there's that which is worth so much more to you. So I don't want to bring this all down to like, there's systems which aren't to do with consumption and production and money, but it's one of the big factors. So occultist writing and reading very old books and reading very strange books is some of the quickest ways to knock you out of the slumber which has been given to you.
Definitely. So what would you say if I said, like, if you consider liberalism as like the idea of like
default position,
default position, but like in its framework, it allows for like a plurality of opinions. Since that,
no, it doesn't.
All right. Well,
no, it doesn't.
Isn't like the whole idea of tolerance and like etc. of like other people?
Well, tolerance is one opinion, because as soon as you have a sort of hegemony and totalitarian idea of tolerance, then, well, what don't we tolerate? Because as soon as someone says, well, I don't tolerate that, then they're intolerant. They're in an intolerant culture. There isn't mass opinions. I haven't heard any original opinion from mainstream politics for a long, long time. These are all, let me think, sort of pseudo-democratic brown-nosing, extrapolated via virtue signaling. I'm a good person. Look at me, I'm a good person. I support X, Y, and Z, which is the latest in tolerance trends, which is the latest in minority politics, which is the latest thing. Look at me, I support them, vote for me. Don't vote for me, on any sort of substantial, practical basis. Vote for me because I'm a good person, I'm a good person, I'm a good person. And I also support democracy. And that's sort of it. But when you look at that whole system as a whole, there's actually no other opinions going on there other than people following the current. And you'll notice those who don't follow the current get knocked out very, very quickly.
True.
And there's much to the left's detriment. So no, I don't even see opinions there. I just see people getting dragged by an unconscious force. I don't see anyone really standing out that much.
Okay, gotcha.
The people who stand out are those who stand still.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think of you. I didn't realize you were saying this like as like the mainstream opinion, being like liberalism as like the dominant ideology. I was thinking more so like the fact that these other opinions are allowed to exist is part of the fact that people think that they have the option of having alternative opinions, and like reading esoteric writings or whatever might also fall under that belief of like, I have the freedom of thought or speech.
Liberalism is a materialist religion. It's it's not. They don't want you reading that stuff. It's all quack to them, because if you understood some of the inherent tenets of spirituality and occultism, you would begin to understand that not everything is a linear progression, which terrifies them because they no longer have their trajectory.
The progress doesn't matter. Isn't really anymore.
Well, no, it never has been. The only progress is a sort of an inner personal one of the inner sense, and that's mapped by your own sense, so that you can't have a sort of a universal progress. It's just not possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just trying to like frame the liberal point of view, like the God of progress or whatever. So okay, so you think that like the occult writing, it gives you an ability to like step away from like the liberal ideology and actually like find alternative.
It gives you a way to step away from ideology as much as you can. Of course, you're still in the occult ideology, and there's a lot of that there. But it's sort of like Moldbug. It's that first thing that knocks you out of. Well, I'll mention it again. The whole A versus B or red versus blue or etc. It knocks you out of the binary dialectic of thinking. The the I have to choose. Well, who's telling you have to choose? And what's the entire system of choice? If there's two choices, then they're wrapped in something. So if there's red versus blue, Republicans versus Democrats, they're wrapped in contemporary American politics, 21st century American democratic politics. I don't choose that, and I never did, and I don't want it. I'm not American, but the same applies to the UK. And that's where exit comes. You just want, no, I'm not taking part. No.
Would you, just because I always like to give the listeners some kind of like, books or whatever to read, what would you say would be some like pivotal occultist writings that people should check out?
I'm not going to recommend any occult stuff. You'll, if you want to do, because I would now recommend people against it.
Oh, really?
I don't want to go into why, really, because it's not some massive reason. If you find yourself there, you'll find yourself there anyway. But since sort of getting drawn back to Christianity, it's not something I massively want to promote. I think. Oh, okay. The only text. No. There's none I really. No.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's fair. You're saying I didn't know that you got back heavily into Christianity. What kind of brought you there? And then I grew up in the church, so it's
a very, very short story, really. I grew up in a Church of England school, which basically means it's mandatory for you to become an atheist at a certain point. And then obviously everyone knows now that I got interested in the occult, and then through that you very quickly realize that pure evil is real, and anyone of a sensible temperament tends to charge back towards neutrality or good as quickly as they can, and you realize the good in Christianity. That's that's it. It's a tale told time and time again. The prodigal son returns.
Sure.
And I'm not going to not admit that it's difficult to stay in that position and not get taken back, but the more you stay and the less you give into that temptation, the better life gets. So
that makes sense. I'm with you. That was that's fairly indicative of like my story too, to be honest. You start to explore things that are not quote unquote of God, and then eventually you're like, all right, there's actual bad shit out there, and I should probably stay away from that.
Yeah.
And then all the spiritual, what seemed like metaphors starts to seem really real. You're like, oh, wait a second, they definitely mentioned.
Yeah, and this is the problem with the materialist culture and societies. They should teach many of these things as real. Temptation, the devil, demons, they're taught so abstractly that they come across only as fictions. And of course, everyone knows that fictions eventually become fact. And if people were taught to spot them from a young age, we'd be in a lot.
You lagged out there for a second. They were taught to spot them.
If people were taught to spot these things from a young age, we'd be in a far better position, because people would have a means to understand what it is that's happening to them, instead of putting it down to material processes such as like atoms, or my body chemistry is wrong, or it's just greed, or it's lust, and etc. There's other ways of understanding these things.
I will definitely say that demon and demonology and all that has been an oddly useful, prudent way to describe technology and kind of the hold it has on the me or any other individual. A lot of the same language and metaphors work exactly the same as demon conversations about demons and what have you. and it's been very insightful for me about like, you know, I mean, like the common one you say on the internet is like pornography is like is a demon, and you know, like these the stranglehold that these things have on you is one to one with the way that possession and stuff.
Yeah. So instead of recommending occult books, I'll just go recommend that everyone go read C.S. Lewis. And I mean that seriously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Screwtape Letters, especially.
The what? The Screwtape Letters?
The Screwtape Letters. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. So just and lastly, are you working on any books or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I'm working on a book on the work of Nick Land. I've been working on it for 3 years. Probably be working on it for another 3 unless someone sort of messages me and says, "Pull your finger out your ass. We all want to read this," which is sort of the archetypal story of going through hell and coming out the other side. That's what I've been working on. And it's burning me out, but it has to burn me out. That's the point. Other than that, it probably will be a while until I do another, because I'm transcribing all the Hermetics interviews, so they're going to be in a book format. It probably will be quite a while longer than usual until I do another Hermetic series, unless I just fancy doing one, in which case we never know. But
you already had like a fairly irregular drop schedule, though, no?
Well, I record 4 and then release as a season, which means I don't have to do the like weekly thing, because everyone I've listened to who does the weekly thing,
it just starts to get boring, and
it starts to get boring. It starts to get repetitive. It starts to you as soon as you have that, it's no longer a case of wanting; it's a case of having. And I never wanted that. So
you're actually, funny enough, the reason why I don't drop weekly, because I saw your podcast come out like every month or so, and I was like, oh, that's way better.
Yeah, and it retains the what do you call it, scarcity of it. You know, sort of like Joe Rogan, to be honest. Every now and again, I'm like, oh, there's a new Joe Rogan, and he understands you only really want it when it's something really good. I don't, you know, no one is, you know, I don't think it's too much to say on that one. But yeah, always working on a lot of stuff, but at the same time, sort of retreating into a calm life now.
That's good. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I'll be sure to link all your website, your podcast, all that stuff in the description. All right, appreciate it.
Thanks very much.